Hey, Josh from Bernal Cutlery again, and wanted to talk to you today about Masakane. We have a bunch of new old stock Masakane knives. Masakane was a Japanese knife maker that was synonymous with Gyutos, especially, for many, many decades. And we have a bunch of unused vintage knives from them from the last part of their production when they were done in Seki. Kanto Gyuto suggests the Tokyo area, and that's where they started production. And over the years, they moved around a little bit. They were in Yokohama for a while, but they ended up in Seki, where a lot of knife making goes on. And we're really stoked to have some of these in the shop. Masakane was making knives for the professional restaurant industry and professional butcher industry. These weren't destined for home use. Some of them might have found their way there, but only if there was a professional, cook or butcher in the house. And they're pretty much they're no frills knives in a lot of ways, but the attention to detail on them is nice, for a user's perspective. This one here is a 300 millimeter Sujiki. This Sujiki would be less of a straight slicer for sashimi or cooked proteins. Mostly these were used for butchers in place of what Western butchers are using scimitars for. So thin slicing, pork and beef, especially cutting steaks, portioning, that sort of work. These have a single wood handle, so it's a single piece of wood, that is, and the part where your fingers wrap around is a solid wood. It has a really nice feel to it. The handles are either paca wood or ebony. Paca is a composite layered, basically a plywood. More stable than a plywood in that it has plastic resin impregnated in it. The grinds on these have a nice convexity on the face of them, and the finish, the fineness of the grind is also a nice feature. The cutting feel on these is actually really excellent. There's very little sticking because of that convexity. And they move through food really smoothly. These weren't expensive knives in their day, and they still aren't. There's some features some users might want to touch up a little bit. Polishing the heel. The spines are relatively smooth. The handles have a nice feel though. Being that these are old stock, we get what was available and feel pretty lucky to have the wide selection that we do. But there's some sizes that are missing or some that are no longer available, and these won't be made ever again. So, we got what we got. But generally we're finding that there's either bolstered or non-bolstered Gyutos and Santokus as well. And both of these have a nice feel to them. The bolstered ones have a different kind of balance to them, of course, being that there's a bit more mass of metal in the center, and the handle has a different kind of geometry and feel to it as well. These non-bolstered ones definitely have the feel to me of a knife meant for meat cutting, although it's going to do great for vegetables as well. The bolstered one has just a little bit of a thinner grind on it. Both are still a nimble knife. A little convexity on the sides of the blades. And having the one-piece wood handle real comfortable on the inside of the fingers. And again, some people might want to smooth out the heel. That's maybe from a finish perspective, my only, I wouldn't say complaint, but one thing I notice, smaller Gyutos are definitely lighter, they're thinner. The stock they were ground from is thinner than on the larger ones. And really like SK steel. The steel is real easy to sharpen with stones. You can also sharpen these on a good quality sharpening steel. You know, a harder, higher quality Western steel made of metal will sharpen these. Obviously, stones will give you a better edge, and that they'll help you manage the geometry behind the edge. But you know, when you don't have time for that, a steel will totally work. Ceramic as well. These Honeski Kaku are great. These are, you know, your yakitori knife here, thicker gauge steel. These are ground right-handed, so a lot of convexity on the right outside and nearly flat on the inside here. If you're a lefty and you're holding this and working with it, it's gonna feel off, unfortunately. But this is a tough little knife meant for both breaking down poultry and also doing the precise, delicate work of separating the muscle groups to make different skewers. These SK steel blades are really ideal for butchery work. The edge pops back really quickly. You can get a nice bite for on uncooked proteins with it. And the edge life is nice and long as well. Real nice firm grip on the slightly bigger handle with this too, if your hands are wet and greasy. Great that we were able to score some petties from this series as well. Vintage petty knives don't seem to come up as often, you know, in a used market. These ones got used up or lost. So you typically find, you know, secondhand big knives way more often than you ever do little ones. So I'm always really happy to find unused vintage knives that are, you know, the smaller knives. Being carbon steel, this might not be the best knife for doing a lot of fruit. It can react with the ingredients that you're cutting if they're real acidic or real base, but these, you know, still have tons of applications. A petty knife is, you know, going to be one of your two desert island knives, in my opinion. A Gyuto and a petty is a great combination. Also, SK carbon steel on these as well. Another interesting feature with these old knives is the markings on the blades. These weren't made for export, so the markings were intended for the Japanese market, and it's some interesting choices that were made here. A number of them have the markings in Romanji and in French. I know these weren't destined for France, though. A number of these are also marked with kanji, and this seems pretty self-explanatory for the Japanese market. My favorite, what I have christened the river dance era, has kind of a 90s Celtic script on it, but still with the Masakane trademark arm and hammer and their marking in the circle, their kanji marking in the circle. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to see more about what we got in stock of these, check out the link in the description below. And thanks again for watching. All right, see you next time.